Oh, yeah, back for more. It is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmington Works. Danny Pommells, our producer, Ben Berry in the cut, making things happen. This was supposed to be a three-man weave. This is now a two-man drill. It is me and Alaa Abdelnaby. Happily, luckily, we have somebody who knows how to work the post, so I don't have to do all the heavy lifting. So Alaa Abdelnaby, of course, Sixers TV analyst, as well as a NBA veteran, former 76er. Happy to have you on the podcast, sir. Welcome.
Danny, good to be with you. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this. We'll have some fun.
Of course we will. And it is Super Bowl week. I'm showing some love to my boys. I'm feeling the energy, the momentum going toward New Orleans and all that the Eagles are doing down there. And the NBA trade deadline is Thursday. We will pick your brain on some of those thoughts, as well as big trades happening in the league. Of course, stuff we cannot avoid talking about, particularly with the Sixers' next opponent on the horizon. But before we talk about what is, let's talk about what was. And man, what a game Friday between the Nuggets and 76ers. But that's followed by the game against the Celtics where they blew this gigantic lead. And I'm really trying to get your opinion on the temperature of this squad because we were trying to talk about what the identity of this team is. They lose 7 in a row. They win 4 in a row. Like, what is their identity at this point? Is it as simple enough for us to think that, man, all these supporting cast guys are playing really well? If they get Joel Embiid, Paul George, Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond, all those guys back, this team could suddenly be really good. Is it that simple, Alaa, or is it more to it than that?
Well, I think that's what the 76ers front office is hoping for, right? Is the fact that when you do get these guys back, what happens with injuries is they're initially very bad. They could hurt you, especially when you lose guys like Joel and Paul George. But the silver lining in that is you're giving opportunities to guys that normally get minutes. They wouldn't be in these situations. I'm thinking of guys like Ricky Council, Justin Edwards. The fact that they're out on the floor in crunch time says a lot about where the Sixers are right now, how many people they're missing. But the thinking is, with those guys getting those playing time, with those reps that they're going to be getting, they're going to be better as individual and collective players moving forward because of the experience. Now you add in later on the guys that are returning from injuries, and hopefully you have a better unit because of the experience that the guys that are the second unit now, but first unit currently, if you will, the experience they've gotten. So we need Joel back. We all know the 76ers aren't complete without the big fella. He has to be back and he has to get a good rhythm. And he too has to acclimate himself to all these new guys that are out there. Paul George also has to come back. But I think it's exciting because you mentioned it, that 4-game winning streak. Good things come from the existing group right now. And then so when you see good things and you think about adding Joel and adding PG and Caleb and KJ and Andre, and hopefully getting this team to look what they pictured it to look like in the preseason, then I think the Sixers have a chance. The question is, where will we lie when everybody
is healthy?
Exactly.
And let's talk about where they currently lie. 20 and a half games out of first place, sitting in the 11th spot at 19-29. Although they are just 5.5 games out of the 6th place, where currently Miami Heat sit, just 1 game above 500. So these ain't like incredible basketball teams. This ain't great basketball being played in the Eastern Conference. I would like for you to give us some insight, though, because, you have this topsy-turvy run of 11 games, 7 losses, 4 wins, all coming consecutively. And then you play these 2 games against the Nuggets and the Celtics where you were right there. You had it. Nikola Jokic takes over down the stretch. Jason Tatum takes over down the stretch. The Celtics game was a 26-point lead, but it was really back and forth with Denver. I mean, the atmosphere, Friday night, the crowd, the stuff that you loved about basketball was all there on Friday night. Take me inside, how, as a team, do you process those types of losses where it's almost but not quite, you're trying to figure stuff out, You get there, man. Sam Cassell was trying to console Tyrese Maxey last night after the game, and Tyrese wasn't having any of it, and he was so frustrated. But Sam, obviously a guy who's been around the block plenty of times, trying to console him. But what do you take away from that in particular, and how, as a player, do you process those types of losses?
Well, I think if you're in the rotation right now, you can't worry about what we don't have, because then I think you start to sell yourself short. You have to go, with what you have. And you've mentioned with what they've had, they've been in ball games. They've beaten some really good teams. I'm thinking of the Cavaliers, the Lakers, but then against the Nuggets and against the Celtics, they were in both those ball games. But I think what you see in both of those ball games, especially in the fourth quarter, is the absence of Joel, is the absence of PG, because what they can do is just face guard Maxey. They had so many dudes on him last night, in particular, Jaylen Brown. At one point, I thought he was over the top with his physicality, but you can see that was what they were trying to do. They were trying to occupy him on the defensive end, beat him up with those low post-up games. They literally started the first quarter and the third quarter with Brown post-ups down low right at the basket. Again, trying to just tax him, trying to take his wind out. So when the fourth quarter comes, he may not have his fresh legs. And they were face guarding him, making sure he didn't get the ball. And you saw the offense kind of get stagnant. So you weren't getting buckets, and then down the other end, you were giving up buckets. And that was the whole difference down the stretch, I thought, in both the Denver and Celtics games.
The Maxey said after the game that he was really frustrated, and he was more or less frustrated. I think if the way I felt from what he said was that he really felt like there's still more to learn from him because he felt like the Celtics were allowing him to play one-on-one early in the shot clock and then would blitz him late, so that way it's a little more frantic. The shot clock's winding down. These two guys are running at you, sometimes three, and you have to find the open man and hope you're getting a good shot. So it was frustrating to see him have to process that. But man, Mark Jackson kind of set me straight on a previous podcast, because I'm like, Mark, they're overusing him. Mark, they're running him into the ground. He's playing too many minutes. He's second in the league in minutes played. Like, just because the other guys aren't here, you can't just keep running him out there. And he's like, Danny, he's just playing basketball, bro. He's a young guy. He's out there playing basketball. It's no big deal. I said, all right, you're right. Let me relax. So that's kind of the temperature I was at with Maxey. But we also see him with all his efforts and all these 30-point games recently, no all-star appearance. Was that surprising to you, or do you feel like there was just too many good guards in the Eastern Conference?
Well, I don't know who you take out, but at the same time, I think I even said it on the air when we were in Chicago. That was the time for auditions, because the coaches were going to vote, and that was right around the corner. And I said he was playing his best basketball. So I thought
he needed a 60 ball there. He needed,
exactly. So I thought he was at least auditioning the best he can for the coaches. Little surprised that he didn't get picked because of the way he's been playing. But I think what it speaks to, Danny, is the Sixers' struggles collectively, right? Your record, even though it isn't in an individual sport, I think the team you're on and how they've done up until the All-Star game does play a little bit of a factor in whether the coaches, pick you or not, because it's harder to play well on a successful team than it is to play well on a team that is, an also-ran, if you will.
A la Jordan Poole. Trae Young also getting snubbed as well. Exactly. So, man, we're trying to endure the Sixers season. And if you don't mind, I do want to indulge the people a little bit with your perspective of how it is riding on the team planes with them and going from city to city and enduring this 82-game grind with them, because we were talking off camera just about how this season is so much different than other seasons, because maybe when you first started working with the organization and broadcasting games, the losing was kind of expected and anticipated, and you knew that they were preparing for something. What this season's losing is something the fans really have to kind of grasp and wrap their heads around, just because you thought they would be contenders. You thought they finally had it all figured out. You thought that Paul George might have been the missing piece, but now you're going into these road trips and trying to navigate this in a way that, oh man, well, I gotta check my own temperature and make sure I'm not getting like sucked down into the depression or the frustration of the losing and things like that. Can you get some insight there on what that's like?
Well, I can give you some background too. In that, previous to having this job, I did college games, and when you're doing college games, you're very much detached. You know, you are objective because you don't have an allegiance to either of the two teams when you walk into a gym that afternoon or that night.
You're kind of like a mercenary. You just show up and
exactly. I get to meet the people that day at shoot around, and then we go to work that afternoon or that night. That's basically the crux of it. But this job is so much more different because you become immersed in their world. I'm on, as you mentioned, the buses, the planes. We're in, the arenas with them. The vibe is a lot. I'm a lot closer to them, so you pick up on people's energy. And when you struggle, and I think part of it too that I didn't mention off air is I'm friends with Nick Nurse. I've known Nick for over a decade, about 13 years, and so I have that connection as well. Yeah. And when your
actual relationships,
and when your friend or anybody you care about is going through some hard times, if you're at all empathetic, you feel it too. And I'm also a Sixer fan, so I live and die with their wins and their losses as well. So when you go through that as intimately as we get to do as announcers, you pick up on what they're letting out or feeling, if you will. You can't help it. After losses, you feel that with them. And when you're around them, you know what they're going through. And as a former player and a guy who's been around the league, I know what that's like. I've been on winning teams. I've been on losing teams. And that vibe can vary. And so having gone through that with them as closely as we do, you feel it a little bit. And I empathize with a lot of what they go through. The schedule's brutal. And I can tell you firsthand that it's brutal because I'm with them every step of the way. And to have to go out there and face face the critics and face the opponents. And this is a merciless league. They don't give any quarter. And so, I empathize with them, and my perspective is unique, and I get to see things and feel things that others don't.
6 games here before the NBA trade deadline, and there are a lot of storylines here, across the league. A lot of storylines with this 76ers team. Of course, the injuries and the lack of presence from Joel Embiid, 13 games this season. Paul George has been injured. Tyrese Maxey had to carry the load. But all of that probably is dwarfing what has been one of the biggest stories, in the Eastern Conference, across the league, is Guerschon Yabusele, bro. Like, you got this guy. Like, everyone loves an underdog story. And this guy I think he had almost 28 against Denver. I can't remember exactly his numbers, but 3 or 4 threes, the rebounds, the steals, the assists. We saw the ferocious dunks last night against the Celtics, albeit in a loss, but just him rolling to the basket, shooting the ball. Just, man, what a player. And the trade deadline is coming up. Speculation surrounding whether or not he could be a player the Sixers hang on to long term or use as a trade piece. First of all, his emergence, and we saw him in the Olympic jersey with France, and then to see him here with the 76ers kind of carrying that momentum over. He's really filled in a huge void that they've lacked with the front court. But what are your thoughts on this guy? And we could talk a little bit about how you feel about him regarding the trade deadline.
He's been a huge addition, right? He's been an enormous plus. He's played better than I saw him play in the French
absolutely
in the Olympics. He's been much, and I thought he was really good in the Olympics. So that says a lot about how I think he's been playing. I think the idea that he is built for this league physically. He's not going to overwhelm you with his speed and his quickness, but he can hold his position. He does not back down when people lean on him. And then coupled with a soft touch and the ability to know the game and make good decisions, he's built like Charles Barkley. That's what he reminds me of.
That's a good one.
that's a guy that I went up against, and you couldn't see around Charles, and you can't see around Yabu, and he might be taller than Charles, but again, I'll use a French word, that derriere of his, is that he uses, and I can tell you as a post player, that's a big part of your game. Because it's what you feel with, it's what you move with, it's what keeps you balanced and low. It's what allows you to explode to the basket. It's integral, and he's really good at it. And we've seen him, hold that position against bigger people. He's had to cover 6'11" and 7-footers. He was on Jokic the other day. Jokic has a hard time moving him around. Then you have the idea, couple that with the fact that at the other end of the floor, he can knock down threes. He's a tough matchup, because who do you have to put up against him that can do all the different things that he can do? Can he guard against the three, get out there and be on the 3-point line, and then also guard in the post? There's not a lot of guys in the league that can do that. That's what makes him unique, and I'm glad he's on our squad.
Yeah, he's a fun player. He popped up at the Eagles NFC Championship game in the middle of the crowd. He was in the middle of the crowd. And obviously, he's a 6'7" dude, so he sticks out.
He's not blending in.
No, he's not blending in, but just the fact that he didn't take the route of going into a suite or a luxury box or whatever, and he's right there mixed in among the people, was pretty cool to see. And he said he had a great time, so that couples it. How are you hanging on to him? Are you trying to sign him long term? Are you using him in a trade piece at the trade deadline, as a trade piece at the trade deadline?
I can tell you what GMs are thinking. No one's untradeable, right? Maybe in this city, maybe Joel Embiid is the one you don't consider, right? Mm-hmm. Maxey might be a close second right now, with our circumstances the way they are, but. Again, Danny, I don't know what's on the other side of that deal. I don't know what's being offered, right? If you were to offer me something, I'm sure there's players in this league that I would give up for Guerschon Yabusele. You know what I mean?
Right.
Although on the top of my head, I'd rather keep him with us and bring in talent to play alongside him. But again, you never know what's offered out there. I'm sure Nico Harrison, wasn't thinking
Mitch Kupchak, right?
3 weeks ago, the general manager of the Mavericks, that he would consider ever getting rid of Luka or finding, even trade for a guy that has value like Luka, something that would satisfy him. But yet here we are.
We are, and we are going to table that discussion and come back to it. But we'll talk a little bit more trade deadline. Take a quick time out here in the Sixers Talk podcast to show some love to our title sponsor, Wilmington University. We wouldn't be here without them. Much love to Wilmington University. Get to know Wilmington University at its virtual open house on Wednesday, February 5th. Details at wilmu.edu/open house. All right, Alaa, back here in the Sixers Talk podcast, and let's just get it out there. The trade deadline is Thursday. Are you a buyer or seller at this point for the 76ers? Do you think that they improve their team more by doing one or the other?
See, it's hard for me to kind of evaluate, and I think it might be for.
Don't even try it. Don't try to escape.
What I mean is, how do you know what you need if you haven't seen your full team? Right. I think that's the question that you're asking yourself is, okay, sure, I want to evaluate and I want to know what we have or what we don't have, what our shortcomings are. But how do you know that? Right?
What you need to improve or where you're
weak.
I think
it's been 7-8 games that those guys, all three, have played together. So I don't envy Daryl Morey's position right now, because I don't believe he's had the proper time or even the proper ability to evaluate what he has and what's in front of him, because we've missed the big fella for so much. PG has just gotten snake bitten since he's gotten here with injuries, little ticky-tack injuries too, like hyperextending your knee twice and then your pinky. I mean, those aren't the kind of things that you imagine when you think of the world of injuries. But yet here we are, and Paul George is having to deal with those, and it's kept him out. So again, I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm just being honest with you, and I don't know what the Sixers are yet. So I don't know what we need and what we have a lot of.
I'll let you go with that one, but I was just checking my phone because I wanted to get the very latest. According to the reason why Noah Levick isn't here is because we're taping the podcast at 1:30 and the Sixers are practicing right now. So he's at the facility working on stories and so forth. The dude is always working. I mean, he's always working, man. But Nick Nurse said everyone practiced for the Sixers today, of course, besides Jared McCain, who's out for the season. But everyone was on the floor, so we're closer to getting healthy, closer to getting full strength. The Sixers next play the Dallas Mavericks.
Indeed.
Where Anthony Davis was traded to, where Luka Dončić was traded from. Where were you when you found out? I'll tell you, I was knocked out, dead sleep. My phone starts buzzing. I'm like, who's calling me? It's my son, because he was staying at my mom's house because he likes to go over there and be free of any consequences or responsibilities.
And get fed, probably.
Right, exactly. So he went to my mom's house. It's whatever o'clock in the morning. I have no idea. I couldn't indulge him with the excitement that he had. But he's like, Dad, Luka's to the Lakers. Luka to the Lakers. I'm like, what? Hello? Huh?
Yeah.
And he was letting me know that happened. Where did you find out? Was it the next morning, or did somebody call you? Did you see a headline? How did it happen?
It was the next morning. I was in bed already, but it was the next morning. I woke up to a text from our producer, Josh Schrager, and he just had the Shams tweet, and then on the bottom it said "Good morning." That's all it said. That's all you needed to say, right?
Because that's just a big head scratcher.
Yeah, the news spoke for itself. You had to sit there for a second and say, "Is this an alternate universe, or is this real?" And then at the same time, you start asking yourself, why? Like, why would Dallas do this? Why would the Lakers do this? And then, you figure out like past histories of especially Luka. I think Luka is the real impetus to this whole thing. The fact that the Mavericks were afraid to sign him to a big deal. All of the past whatever years he's been in Dallas and their experiences with him have kind of scared them into committing $345 million is what he was eligible for. So I think that they did the next best thing and got him out of there and traded for somebody that they feel makes their team better right now.
There's a comparison here, and you can tell me if it's a really good one or not, because whatever, Luka, the 70 points last season, they let go of Jalen Brunson. So in essence, they traded Luka and Jalen Brunson and don't have either of them. But Joel Embiid signed a max extension the Sixers were not afraid to sign him to. Luka is younger, was due more, 100 million more, but whatever was going on with him scared them more than whatever was going on with Joel Embiid that allowed the Sixers to plunk down that money, even though that extension won't even kick in for a couple years. So it's so funny. Time and circumstance determine so much.
And you don't know what happens behind the scenes, in either scenario. And that comes down to like the relationships with the people around Luka, right? Like, what did they feel observing him that would make them do what they did, right? Like, I'm sure it wasn't taken lightly. And those things, as you can imagine, Danny, don't happen in a day. They've been around him for years. Right. Yeah. And they've gotten a chance to, I'm sure at the beginning just kind of sat back and let him be him because he came out of the box such a spectacular player. But then year after year, when you come back and let's say you're a little heavier, let's say you don't look as committed when you come back, you don't come back ready. You have to get ready when you come back. Right. Those things, I think, to the observers around may have started to chip away at Luka's, luster, if you will. And if you believe reports out of Dallas, this last calf strain that happened in Dallas on Christmas Day, he did not garner a lot of sympathy after that injury. Exact opposite. He garnered a lot of anger and resentment. So I think, all those things may have played a role in it, if you believe what's been reported.
Right. And it's just a league just filled with drama, man. The NBA just cannot escape
it's human
it.
beings, right?
Yeah.
Human beings, we all make mistakes. We all, we all perceive things differently. Same thing could happen, but you have a whole bunch of different point of views from a different people. That's humanity. That's human nature.
The way it plays out, it's like you have the Mavericks who they decided to choose Kyrie over Luka, and Kyrie was the guy that everybody was like, "Whoa, how can you ever spend money on him?"
That says something too, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. That's what. Right. He's a malcontent. How could you ever? But they're like, you know what? Get this guy out of here. We'll hang on to this one. So funny. I mean,
and the thing is, like, here's the other thing. Let's not forget star power. My sister and my niece, they used to live in Dallas. They just recently moved to the Northeast, so they've been living in Dallas for over 15 years, and they know how big Luka is down there. And that even more like speaks to, what they must have seen behind the scenes for them to go against the fan base. And
right.
I mean, besides Dak Prescott, I don't know if there's anybody bigger in Dallas than Luka. And yet they still let him go.
And he's anointed by Dirk, the guy that gave them their only championship.
And he's a hell of a player. I mean,
yeah, right.
Can go.
Whatever his attitude or whatever, it was time to move on. On the flip side, the Lakers said Anthony Davis have a nice life and moved on from him at 31 years old. But it had to, like, Luka's too lucrative a player to turn down. Like AD was just it was basically whoever you want except LeBron type of thing, probably. And Bronny.
Yeah. I think they're moving on, aren't they? Like, I think they're even moving on. And this is one of the more interesting underlying parts of this is the fact that they didn't go through LeBron, the fact that they didn't even alert him, right? Like, he was the third call, I think, that Rob Pelinka made after that. I think that speaks to the fact that the Lakers are looking out for themselves, right? Like, I don't know if they're going to be putting in all their chips to try to win something for LeBron in the next year or two. I think they're thinking about the next 8 to 10 years.
Man, oh man, yeah, because LeBron can't be there forever for sure.
Right.
Rob Pelinka, I think I said Mitch Kupchak earlier. I don't know why, but
he had the job before him.
He did. But here we are at the trade deadline. Obviously, a players' league. De'Aaron Fox forcing his way out of Sacramento. San Antonio was his destination. Basically, handpicked where he wanted to go. A players' league, man, and when you look back on your playing career and how the game has changed and evolved, do you think you were born too early? Like, what do you
I blame my folks on a daily basis. Whenever I speak to them, I just ask them, why couldn't you have a little more patience? We could all be swimming in green right now. Right, but I think, listen, the bottom line is, back in the day when you went against the organization, when you did not follow their wishes and you were asked to be traded, teams went out of their way to send you to the worst places possible, right? Because their thinking would be, oh yeah, you want to leave? Okay, let me show you what leaving looks like. Right? And then they'll want you to regret it forever. I'm reminded of, I played with the late, great Drazen Petrovic.
Mm-hmm.
And Drazen and I were in Portland, sitting the bench our first year, and we got to be close. And he was behind Clyde Drexler and was never going to beat Clyde Drexler.
Right.
And so I think he realized that. And so he asked for a trade very politely, never made a stink. He wasn't like that. And they sent him to New Jersey, which at the time didn't have like Chuck Daly. Yeah, it was purgatory.
It's Exodus.
Yeah. And like I said, and he had asked politely, and he was a good teammate, and he wasn't a moaner or a moper. And yet that's what they did to him. So now you see a guy like De'Aaron Fox who refuses to sign their extension, right? They offered him a max contract. He said, no, I'm good. I want out. And for him to get exactly what he wants, Paul George goes from OKC to the Clippers, right? KD goes to the Warriors and then like those kind of things would have never happened. The league has changed. Good or bad, the league has changed.
Man, it's been fun talking, Alaa. I'm curious here what you think
Always
the
fun with you,
Sixers.
Danny.
What do you think the Sixers are going to do here? How are they going to end up? Is this a play-in team? Is there a run in the making? Like, what are you thinking?
So I think the 76ers have got to have, and this is not a state secret, I think everybody knows this, we got to have the big fella back for as many games as we possibly can post All-Star break.
Mm-hmm.
God willing, his knee is able to withstand, the run the rest of the way, because we still get to implement what they were talking about at the beginning of the year, which is gearing up for the playoffs. Now, with Joel's absence and PG's absence, hopefully their legs will be fresher, right? Less taxed because they've missed games early on. And then everything has to go right for the Sixers. Let's not kid ourselves, right? Everything has to fall into place. They need to gel quickly. They need to figure out how to play with one another quickly. I do think the good thing about what's happened is the rest of the guys have figured out how to play with one another. That's why you saw that 4-game win streak with no Paul George and no Joel Embiid against some of the better teams in the league, because they are learning how to play with one another. There was 11 new guys at the beginning of the year. Let's not forget, that's a lot to get into a new system with terminology and rhythm. And it looked like at the beginning of the year, at times they weren't playing hard, but it wasn't that they weren't playing hard. They were having to think through things out on the floor. And it looked like a step slow. They looked reactive instead of proactive. And I think some of that is in the past now. But they need the big fella back, and they need Paul George, and they need Maxey clicking with the supporting cast that has gotten better through the experience they've gained. Hopefully we'll be a better team moving forward. I've got my fingers crossed, Andy.
Oh, man, the glass is half full, according to
It has to be, man. It has to be.
Oh,
Let's go, man.
We're going to take that energy. We like the way you're talking, so we're going to take that energy and carry it into this back-to-back here with the Mavs and the Heat. Winning is the ultimate deodorant, as they say, whether it's for Drazen or everybody. So let's show some love to Alaa Abdelnaby. We appreciate you joining us, and much love to you and the family. For Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pommells. Thanks for listening and watching to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmute Works. We'll see you next time.